Hi all, we are in this session of Café com Penz in the Aves edition of 2019. And today, besides Dr. Mário Penz, we have the pleasure to have our guest, Henk Enting, the Global Technology Lead for Poultry in Cargill. And we are gonna have a nice topic to talk to him today, which is microbiota. Henk leads a whole team of researchers and technology application managers globally in Cargill, and he works a lot in this topic, which is a hot topic for the poultry industry nowadays. So Henk, thank you for having this conversation with us. It's actually a coffee with friends. So,
and it's a very nice coffee as well.
So we would like to talk to you and to hear your insights on what's on in the market and in the poultry industry about microbiota. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities, both within Cargill, but also generally in the poultry industry?
I think what you see in the last few years is a lot of work on microflora in general at universities, also industry, how that's related actually to performance, and also how feeds and feed additives are changing that. If you look specifically at Cargill, what we have been doing there is also trying to find out how microflora is affecting performance of poultry.
Great. And one question that it comes to our mind is that we see every day a different technology coming on measuring microbiota, right? So it increases also the complexity, and each time we see more complex solutions trying to look at the whole microbial profile of the birds. And we see difficulties on that, on how to take decisions and to get answers or insights from all this complexity and variability within microbiota.
Yeah, if you look at the whole microbiome, that's a very complex thing where you have a lot of bacteria and also the difference between known and unknown bacteria, or bacteria that are not very well described. One of the key points we think we can work on is more focusing either on some specific bacteria strains or to a part of the microflora that's more related to performance of chickens, and also which leads to the use of antibiotics in the field. So let's say target specific strains to work in, instead of looking at the whole complex microbiome, because that almost looks like looking at the whole world and then trying to find something that is affecting then performance. But it's more, let's say, looking at parts of the microbiome that are more related to performance of the...
And Henk, two doubts that I have with those things are, how do we decide those clusters? Because we are talking about clusters of bacteria. This is my first question. And the second question is, how do we take this technology that's quite academical to a real life situation?
Yeah, one thing that we did, and it was also nice to have a team involved, also working more with the food business, so have different expertise in that as well, was to start with I would say a large number of bacteria. Bacteria that were already described in literature or that had a relation with more food health or food-related issues like Salmonella or Campylobacter. Selecting a large number of these, and then first start to relate the growth of broiler chickens to what we see in these, let's say, large amount of bacteria that had been selected on base literature and earlier experiences. And based on that, with some advanced statistics, bacteria were found, or a number were found, that had a relation with performance of the chicken. So that was more the basis then to start further work, and from individual chickens to pens in experiments, and then go to the field to see if the relations that were found were still valid, or that we had to look at different bacteria then. And the other question, and then the question, let's say, how to get this to practice.
Yes, how to put in the real life.
And in real life, the nice thing was that when starting with individual chickens and relating then the individual chickens to the microflora, and then making that, expanding that to, let's say, pen trials, and then to the field, and also looking, for instance, at field level between good and bad performing flocks, and looking at the differences in microflora and finding then the relations with growth performance. That now, after further developing the the whole microflora array with a number of these markers, which is still over 100 markers, but it's more manageable than looking at the whole microbiome. Is to get that now, we have that now ready or almost ready to go to market by a relatively easily sampling technique, and that you can have a rapid result or analysis of the microflora array, and then you can have 4 different farms or different flocks an idea or a good impression what the microflora is and where the points to improve are. That can be related to either nutrients or raw materials or feed additives, and how then to influence the microflora. And from maybe the first experience in the field that we have, that also works as we were expecting. So we do see an improvement in performance.
You'll be learning by experience.
Yeah, by experience, not only in Europe, but also in the Americas, Brazil, and we did a whole series of trials in Asia too, to see how these relations were.
Henk, I would like to get back to the practical application later on, but I would also want to look at the history behind these applications or this development in Cargill. We have a colleague, a Brazilian colleague based in Belgium that works with this technology, right? Yeah. And he always mentions to us that this microbiome analysis is much more of a problem of mathematics and statistics, because we cannot look at this analysis as simple statistics or regular statistics, but with artificial intelligence and other types of statistics. And it's not that much of a problem in the way we analyze microbiota, but the way we analyze data from this microbiota. So we understand that this part of the development within Cargill took very long time to be put in place, right? So could you talk about the history behind it?
The history is already quite long indeed. It's actually a combination of some things that were done in the food platform by looking at a rapid detection method for salmonella, and some work that Legacy Provimi was already doing to find some biomarkers. That was expanded later on. But by collecting all the data, you actually see that linear relations between microflora and performance of chickens don't work. Especially when you look at, let's say, 450 different strains, then all these linear relations, that becomes really complicated. One of the, I would say, unique things that we were actually able to find relations was all kind of non-linear statistics behind it, with also some self-learning algorithms to find out how the microflora was actually related to the performance of the chickens. And that's more the unique part behind the whole microflora work. So it's selecting the bugs that actually were related to performance, and then having this rather advanced non-linear self-learning algorithms behind the whole analysis of the microflora that actually made that we are able to predict in a good manner the performance of the chickens based on the microflora that we see either in trials or in the field.
And in our discussions, you always mentioned that in the past we had this view that the microbiota was kind of stable at some point at 14 to 20 days. It should be stable. And what we see with this methodology, that it's not exactly like that. And what about the index of maturation of the microbiota, the agility that the microbiota matures, and how important this is for health and for performance?
Yeah, let's say in contrast to most of the 16S techniques, we still see that after 14 days there is still a change in the microflora. And one of the things that we have seen, that the faster this whole process of maturation is going, the better the performance of the chickens is. And one of the nice things, for instance, what we did in the UK, where some farms were actually the in-house hatching of the birds, that these birds already at 14 days had a more mature microflora, but we also saw that these birds are better performing, and in general more mature microflora at a younger age is associated with a better performance of the chicken. So by all these changes that we see, it doesn't stop after 14 days.
And one thing that is very interesting, some evidences, not the microbiota evidences, came from different research places, that if you change the diets around 15 days, the results were not that good. And when we get our data on microbiota, we realize that there is a big things happening in this kind of window, no?
And one of the nice things, what we also did is, let's say first you give, for instance, a corn-based diet, and then you change over to wheat, and then you base over to corn again, or have a no additive again. What you then see is that if you make all these sudden changes, you see a very rapid change in the microflora. Some bugs are growing a bit slower than the other ones, so you have a high risk that some of the bacteria are taking over. So if you have sudden changes in your feed composition with age, you actually see that you have a disturbance of the flora that can result in either more bacterial overgrowth or some strains, and that you can have more inflammatory responses as well. So you might see then, if you have these sudden changes, that feed intake drops, growth goes down, that you actually see related with the microflora.
And should we say, based upon what you are bringing, that we need to be a little bit more conservative in terms of how changing the ingredients from phase to phase? Because sometimes the least cost feed formulation comes with a good proposition for the second diet. You get excited with that, and then you put on that and you bring a problem that you cannot measure the consequences.
What you see with antibiotic reduction is that we like to keep it as constant as possible to to have the right microflora, but not, if it's not to disturb it too much. And one of the things that you, for instance, see in Western Europe or the Netherlands, that there are now some feed producers that have almost the same diet. Well, it's still pre-starter, starter, grow, etc. But the composition of the pre-starter, very logical, but not that much. Very conservative way, but then with more wheat, for instance, in the starter feed than what we used before. Because we always thought that corn was good for chickens. We with all these microflora knowledge, we drifted a bit away from that idea. So it's a bit with more wheat. We see also more adult microflora at a younger age. So you get to more constant diets from the pre-starter almost to the finisher feed. With also protein levels that in the pre-starter are lower, also because of the microbial growth and are more constant. So you get almost back, it's not one phase, back to one phase feeding, but it's getting very different from where we were some years ago.
And one thing that I always think, Henk is a person in his responsibility. He travels all over the world. I wonder how much our clients are really engaged in this kind of discussion by the way that they can understand that the things are changing. So we'll need to jump, because you guys from Europe, you are already looking the digestive tract from a different perspective than anyone else in the world. So how in your crusade all over the world, the people is really getting, motivated to say, oh, come on, let's think different now.
Now, what you see now with the first experience, also with applying the whole micro array that we have, now that's starting to be applied to some of the customers, and that we see that predictions are, let's say, as we have thought, based on the earlier work, that you now see that in other regions we start to work in the same manner, and you see also Southeast Asia wants to reduce antibiotic use rapidly. You see now from 1st of January, China will reduce it as well. Russia wants to export more to China, for instance. Now they have to reduce all of a sudden. So now all of a sudden you see quite a lot of changes in the use of antibiotics and how should we design our feeds or what to do with farm management. So all of a sudden that is getting quite a rapid change. So the things that we have been working on, and here also with some of the customers here, some pilot work, you see that is now, I would say, within our own feed business and also with the animal protein business, it's more going in all the same direction as we already had been working on more experience in Europe. And let's say what you have been doing here in Brazil as well. That's now going to be applied there as well. So you see that it's getting a more standard, well, not standardized, but a similar approach on how to reduce antibiotics.
And how interesting is that moving to this new mindset way of animal production, we can see that different additives also have different, actions on the microbiota.
That may be a point that we also need to change our concepts, right? Thinking about this stability of the microbiota, we see that in this transition to antibiotic-free systems, we see a lot of companies and ourselves doing combinations and putting different additives that do not conversate with each
that can
other.
be conflicting effects.
So all these sudden changes in microbiome that we see in changing ingredients also happens when we change additives, for instance. So maybe we can be causing disturbance in the microbiome through trying to be fair with the additives, right? So we have to be very cautious in putting together a program that brings stability as the first choice, right?
On top of that, you also see that some of the concepts we believe in all of a sudden are not valid anymore, because based on earlier work or in the past, we always believed that high lactobacilli was good, for instance, so we had to promote lactobacilli. Now with more understanding more on the, let's say, the whole microbiome, we actually see that the higher lactobacilli are in general, the worse the performance is, or the higher the risk on wet litter is, and that there are only, or not only, but that some specific strains of lactobacilli are more favorable, and that we would like to keep the rest down. Or if you also, with all the data that we have now collected with the microbiome from the studies and also from the field, you can also look in your data set and make, for instance, different salmonella positive and negative. And what's the difference in your whole microflora between salmonella positive and negative? What are the things that you specifically see if you don't have salmonella? You see some other bacteria. Are these then the ones that we should stimulate to get rid of or reduce salmonella? So you can, based on having more data about the microflora and understanding better some of these relationships, you can also start using it also as a screening tool for new feed additives or different feeds, which are the ones that are more favorable for promoting salmonella or how to reduce it. And for instance, with some of the wheat bran, different particle size, there you already see that it's also helping to reduce salmonella because you get a higher local butyrate production. So it's changing all the concepts actually that most of it that we believed in. Let's say, part of that is actually changing. And
this is a subject that we cannot finish in 10 minutes.
You cannot finish in 10.
It's so unbelievable, the new era that we are getting into, that I always think, for the new generation that is coming, animal production will have a completely different perspective. So faster we get into it, we'll suffer less. Because that's the real life,
And the nice thing is you can actually start formulating on your microflora.
Oh, yes.
You can put it as a nutrient, and then you formulate based on your microflora.
Can you imagine? And then you get the point that we used before, antibiotic, growth promoters, or therapeutic, and that was the solution. I don't know if that was always the solution. And lactobacillus was good, and the others were bad. And that's the way that I started.
All of a sudden,
so now the lactobacillus are good, but not all of them.
Not all of them are good.
So because anytime that you disturb this balance, doesn't matter who is who. And that comes the point. So I think we did.
There's all different things.
Yes.
So for the future, we can see that there's a lot to come with all these learnings, applications in nutrition and in health. So we can see a bright future in microbiome and come into practice. That's going to happen soon, Henk? Or?
Yeah, that's going to happen, or is it made ready for application now? So that's getting ready soon. And then the next steps are also to find out how is the microbiome, and we already did trials with that. How is it actually related with immune responses, and what do you then need to further modulate actually immune responses to also reduce drops in feed intake, or how to do that better than we are doing today. So already work is going on there, but first step is now to have the microbiome array ready for field application, get more insights, more data, better control how to change the microflora to improve performance and reduce the use of antibiotics. And then the next upcoming steps are then also how does that actually link with the whole immune?
It always will be a challenge, Marcelo. You see, because if I look at my microbiota, I'll go to the laboratory, collect a sample, and I can make an exercise for that day. But all right, it's my microbiota. But then we get inside of 30,000 chicken, So it will be challenging, but there is no way to turn back. For sure, one day we'll have these things on real time, information. So we need to be a little bit futurist, but we need to respect that's the way to go.
Yeah, no, that's the
And
direction
then
to go.
makes
yeah.
the life easier, because if I want to resist that this is the way to go, because theoretically it's already there.
Yeah, it's there already. So.
And with the mindset shift that we have to pass through to this transition to restriction of antibiotics, we have to move from controlling diseases to promoting health, and that comes to microbiome. We cannot work without that.
And we didn't talk one word about immunological response.
Absolutely.
And,
That has
and we
all to
didn't
do
talk
with
about
that.
farm management either,
yes.
but that's another important thing.
Yeah.
That's
Then we got
also
another-
there.
So at least 2 topics for next coffees we have, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Let's
we
leave
can
for
talk
that.
about that.
Yeah.
Let's
Well,
leave something for the next.
Let me do that.
So Henk, appreciate your presence,
Thank you very
your
much.
openness to
Thank
be
you very
here
much,
with
Henk.
us. And we are anxious to have new insights and new technologies to apply in our industry here in Brazil and all Latin America.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mario.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we hope to see you again in the future.
Yes,
Thank you too.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for joining us. I hope you appreciate being here with Henk Enting to understand more about all the technologies and new nice things that are to come with this absolutely new world that is coming to the poultry industry. We have to work with that. We have to work with the future, and microbiota is something that is already the present. It's not the future anymore. So thank you all, and see you next time in the Coffee with Penz. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you, guys.